Thanks for coming out. Excited to tell you a little bit about my story. We'll start with the story. So Jennifer, my girlfriend, and her friend were in Sedona, and they wanted to find a hot tub at their place they were staying. So they went and walked to the pool area. They got in and they're like, wow, this thing is massive. And they stepped in and it was like 2 feet deep, and they're like, it's kind of shallow. Then they tried to get in, and it's also kind of cold, and this isn't very fun. And then they looked across the way and they're like, oh, the hot tub's over there. This is the kiddie pool. And so if you know Jennifer, that's pretty funny. And why do I tell that story? There is no reason, just that Jennifer's here and I wanted to make fun of her. And it loosely correlates to the metaphor of my talk, which is it's going to be sort of a shallow walk in the shallow end of a kind of a high-level overview of my story. And so a deep dive, if you guys have questions, ask them at the end. We can go a little deeper with the deep dive. I'll stick around as well and hang out for a little bit. Started with social work. I did Teach for America for 2 years in Chicago. And then I moved to Colorado for the mountains and for a job. I worked at a halfway house with juvenile youth coming out of juvie, and I ran an urban garden. We grew that beet, and I ran a wood shop, and we would make cutting boards and whatever else we felt like doing. So it was a pretty cool gig. Kids constantly were going back to jail or going back to drugs. It did not pay well. It's like a burnout. It's a burn you out kind of job, and that's what it did to me. And so I started thinking, what else do I want to do? I thought that buying a house meant giving up my freedom. And I love mountain biking. I love skiing. I like going on different trips. And I felt like I'm living with 4 cool guys. One of them owns the house. He's house hacking. We're all paying his mortgage. I'm fine with this. It provides a lot of great things and freedom in my life. And so I basically stumbled upon house hacking, financial independence, real estate investing. I was driving home from skiing. I had just taken that picture for my cousin. You can see Flat Stanley up there, if you're familiar with Flat Stanley, all the places he'll go. And so took that for my cousin, and then we were driving home, and my buddy was listening to a Bigger Pockets podcast. And I thought, this is an interesting idea. Maybe this is kind of what I'm looking for as I'm burnt out, as I'm looking for something different, as I'm looking for more freedom in my life. And so I started getting educated like crazy. I probably spent a year reading these different books. These are a couple of them, listening to some podcasts. And the 2 biggest things I took away that were, besides sort of the education and the practicality was these 2 quotes. One of them being what's the worst that could happen if you try this? If you try it and you fail, then you're back to work until you're 65, and you're living off of a retirement or a pension. And so, if that's the worst, then I'm going to go for it. And then the second quote that really motivated me is, if you can live like no one wants to for a couple of years, you can live like no one can for the rest of your life. So making some sacrifices was pretty motivating to pursue some of that freedom that house hacking was going to provide and that I had been learning about. So I found a mentor. If you are looking for a mentor or an agent, this is a 100% proven strategy. Go find a sign pole and call the number on it. This guy, I was riding my bike around to the park by my house to mountain bike. I knew I wanted a house hack at this point. I knew that I wanted an exit plan so I could go to the next one, and I wanted the first one to cash flow. I live near a college. This guy's renting out 6 houses to college students. I couldn't read the last 4 numbers. So I go to the next light pole, and luckily that one wasn't destroyed. I call him. I say, hey, I want to do what you're doing. Can I take you to lunch? And he said, I'm too busy. You can't buy me lunch, but I'll take you and show you my properties. So we went around, saw his properties, and then I found out he was a realtor too, and so then I started using him, and he found this house for me on the market, and this was my first house hack. So it was listed as 3 bedrooms. It's actually 4. which was sweet. And then it's got this weird tandem garage. So that blue garage is in the front. And if you drive through that, it actually is another garage door at the back of the garage. And that back garage was pretty much being used as like a storage area. And so he said, this is actually 4 bedrooms, and here's your 5th bedroom right here, which is what it requires to kind of be a great cash flowing student rental property, was 5 bedrooms. And he's always looking for ways to make a 5th bedroom. And I had just listened to a guy that was Airbnb-ing in Colorado Springs, and I thought, this isn't a bedroom, this is a studio apartment. So I learned this is, I think, a great point, and I'm not biased because I'm a realtor, but I think finding a good realtor is like massively helpful. And this guy was that for me. He wrote up a plan, he drew it up on graph paper, he took me to the regional building department, we sat with planners, and we talked through like what can work and what can't, what has to be done. Then he got contractors to come over, they got bids, and we had the whole plan up and running by the time that I closed. And so I learned a ton about how to convert a garage. We made a studio apartment, and the bug was caught. I was like, this makes sense. Like once that garage started making income, once I rented all the bedrooms, I was like, this just makes sense. So there's the garage at the back of the garage, and we converted it into a nice little studio apartment. That closet is where that garage door was, separating the 2 units. We poked out a different door, and we poked out a couple windows, and I had a studio apartment. So $260, put $7,800 down, got the house, rented 3 bedrooms for $600 apiece. The 200 square foot studio apartment makes me, after all expenses, $1,650 on Airbnb. That paid my mortgage alone. Then I got some mortgage, some reserves. I took a personal loan to convert the garage. I took a $20K loan. I was able to convince my dad to give me $20K. He said, you're a risk, you haven't done this before. And what do you think the interest rate was for my own father? 10%. My own dad, like shark loaning me. So, like, in all seriousness, it offered a level of comfort to know, like, my dad's not going to foreclose on my house if this house hacking idea doesn't work. And so that was a real positive. And obviously super grateful of like the privilege of having a dad that can and is able to loan me $20K. But 10%, Dad, come on. So cash flow, living for free, total net positive, $19.12 a month. That's freaking sweet. That's probably more than half of my social work income a year. So that's my portfolio. That'll start to build. This is my second house hack. Bought this with the same realtor. At this point, I've switched from social work to software sales. This was 2 family rooms and 3 bedrooms, and a 2-car garage. It was really easy to sort of move some walls around and make a closet, and I turned one of those family rooms into a 4th bedroom. And then I converted the 2-car garage again. Borrowed $10K from 3 different people, negotiated different interest rates with them, 2 friends and a grandparent, much better than my father's percentage. And the big thing I learned from this is like bedroom rentals is a great way to cash flow, but I started to learn like it might not be the most scalable. So I think I could maybe manage like 3 or 4 bedroom rental houses, but after that it's I don't know how scalable it really is. So here's that garage conversion. Got some rough plumbing and the framing in, and then here's some of the final. It turned out really well. And then some numbers, bought it for $318. So we offered this was when everyone was starting to freak out about COVID in it was a little bit after March, so it was about May 2020. And it was sort of this lull where like no one was doing anything because they didn't know what was going to happen. And I was scared to make a move, but my realtor sort of walked through all those fears with me, and we were like, let's pull the trigger. So we offered $11K over with the expectation that like we're going to get our closing costs covered, and so we did that. I put $15,900 down. lived in a bedroom, rented 3 out for $600, rented the garage out for $1,000 to a college student, had those expenses. And the interest I worked out with those 3 lenders was only interest for 2 years. And so that balloon payment for their principal is coming up here shortly. Cash flow 338, living for free of 600, adding another 938 a month to the portfolio. And then this is the current house hack. So I wanted a separate space for Jennifer and I. I didn't want to rent out bedrooms. I wanted a little more privacy. And this one was crazy. Like, qualifying for this was a nightmare. The lender came to me after the appraisal and said, the appraiser marked this as illegal use, meaning you cannot run this as a duplex, but it's separated into 2 units. You can't get a loan on this. And I said, well, what's the solution? He said, you have to go to the city and get them to write off that this has always been a duplex, and if it burns to the ground, it can be rebuilt as a duplex. And I said, okay. So I called a bunch of city places, bunch of different zoning departments, finally figured out who I need to talk to, what form I need to fill out, and how I need to prove it. And there's all these different ways of how I could prove it, and none of them were going to work, except there was a suggestion on there to call the library. And so I called the library. They looked up in their archives phone books from 1950 to the present, and they were able to show that they had 2 different units on a lot of those different phone books, and that it therefore had been built as a duplex, because there was one like from the first year it was built, and then it was annexed into the city in the 80s, and when it was annexed into the city, it was annexed onto residential zoning land, but it was still operating as a duplex, and then all the way up to the present. And so we were able to use that to prove that it was a duplex, built as a duplex, and has always been operated as a duplex, and the city was okay with that. It was a mess, but very empowering to be like, we're going to make this work. So there's 518 and 518 and a half, West Brookside from 1972. Those are actual pictures of the phone book. So I did all that, and they're like, okay, we can close. And then I looked at the appraisal, and I said, which I hadn't done this whole time. I looked at the appraisal, and I was like, it's marked as a legal, non-conforming duplex, and the highest and best use is appropriate. And I went to the lender, and I said, what's the deal here? Like, why did I just do all this work? And they're like, oh, yeah, we messed up. This is fine. The appraiser marked this fine. But it's a duplex, so you can't do 5% down, you gotta do 15%. We can close in a week. So now I'm bringing another 10% down, and we can make it happen, but I'm like sick of my W-2 job. I'm ready to move on. This is kind of like financial freedom for me if I get this one because my expenses are so low. Like, I'm gonna do it. So we did it. Some things I've learned: don't take no for an answer. Try and find a solution. I learned a lot about city zoning, the different departments in the city, and the people in system make mistakes. So, if you hear an answer that you don't like, or I don't know, check them. This is our dog Lily. She approves. Every once in a while, she'll walk around with like her gum stuck on her tooth and so she's up there barking at people, looking real mean. So this duplex was $440. I had to put 15% down, $400 on the top. We Airbnb the bottom for $21.90. It is kind of our average right now through like 7 months. Expenses and budgeting for reserves. Cash flow on $159, living for free. Adding $859 to the portfolio. So that would be kind of the first year of each house hack. But now the updated numbers, as I've the garage at the second house hack is making $1,500 a month now to a college student. The Airbnb numbers on the first one are similar. I've raised rents in the bedrooms a little bit. So the total numbers now for those 3 houses, this is net income after expenses, after budgeting for other reserves, is 4,486, nearly 54,000 a year. So pretty stoked on that. Definitely happy to have left social work and found house hacking. So get your jackets on for this. This is a little Burr story. I know that joke is lame. I rehearsed that joke, and I still like it, so I used it. So I am 1 for 1 on mailers. This is like another story of just like crazy luck. Like, I've dropped off a couple letters in people's houses, like in the neighborhood when they're foreclosed or in pre-foreclosure. This is the first one I put a stamp on. It was on the market for a while. I had my eye on it. It finally expired. And I was like, oh, interesting. I wonder what's wrong with it. I went to the assessor's site, typed in the address. It was owned by an LLC. Went to the Colorado State Business website, typed in the LLC, owned by another LLC, looked up that LLC. It's some business that like specializes in hiding your name from things in LLCs so that you can protect yourself. And I'm like, I'm never going to find this person's name. So I just picked the mailing address of the LLC from the assessor's site, wrote a little letter. I have no idea, this is what I wrote. I have no idea who you are. I could not find it. You've done such a good job hiding your name. I'm impressed. I'd like to buy your home. And 3 days later, he called me. So it started on the market at 410. It expired at 360. When he called me, he said, I'm down to 330. We got him down to 270. There was a lot wrong with the house. It had frozen in the crawl space 3 times and flooded. The sewer was offset. A good chunk of the sewer was replaced, and then another 50 feet that went under like a new road and then under an intersection was concrete and falling apart. It could fall apart at any point. If so, we are going to have to direct traffic. We're going to have to rip up a road. It's going to be very expensive. We hope that lasts a long time. The walls were not insulated, so we had to go to retro foam. They drill a hole in like 2 spots, and they fill it up with foam, and it kind of fills in between the studs. So we insulated all the exterior walls. The foundation had significantly settled. The main floor beam was sunken like a V, and we had to go in there and jack it up, rip up the floors and jack up that floor beam so that it could be straight. Now, we also got 2 quotes from a foundation companies, one for $50,000 and one for $70,000. One foundation company said you could probably get away at this point with just doing $20,000 of work. So we used all that, we negotiated, we got them down to 270. We're like, before we spend 20K on this, like, let's get an engineer in here. Let's get someone who's like not incentivized to tell us that something is very wrong and we need to spend thousands of dollars with them. So we paid an engineer $600. He came out, he's looking around, he did all his stuff, and he said, what are you gonna use this for? We said a rental. I said, I wouldn't do anything. This is fine. And that was the best $600 that we spent in the whole process. So we decided we want the floors to be a little leveler, so we spent $7K sort of fixing the floors and leveling those so that, I don't know, if we try and sell it in the future, like people aren't going to be super concerned with a foundation issue, or if there's renters, there are not going to be some affected quality of life in any way. So we decided to pay for that. So all I have to say, like, foundation can be super scary, but in Colorado, like, the soil's moving, and if it's an old house and there's cracks and it's moved, like, it doesn't have to be a massively scary thing, but obviously it is an important thing. So we got a hard money loan for $330, $270 to buy the house, $60K to rehab. Our exit plan is to refinance. We're going to pay off the hard money. We should get most of our money back out of it. And fully furnished, decorated, landscaped, hot tub, fire pit. We're going to put this on Airbnb. We should be all in for about 81. So between me and my business partner, we'll probably only have 10 to 20 of our own money in there, hopefully, afterwards, which is pretty sweet. And then we're projecting to make a net income of $21,000 a year on Airbnb. And then refinancing my first house hack. So I think this is sort of where, like, at least in this like market the last couple years, right? Like, been pretty lucky with these massive increases in price. Like, taking out some equity and putting it back to work is a sweet strategy. I purchased this house hack for $260,000, as I said. It just appraised for $410,000, 58% appreciation in 2.5 years. I have no illusion that that will like maybe ever happen again, right? So, but I'm going to take advantage of it that it did. I took out $55,000. That was in February, so that's a little outdated. Principal, interest, taxes, insurances all staying the same. I got rid of PMI. My interest rate was pretty significantly lowered. So that's a pretty sweet return. Took out $55,000 on a $10,000 down payment, nearly 500% return. Bye-bye W-2. Bye-bye social work, bye-bye software sales. Real estate is way more fun. Now I'm a full-time realtor. Qualified business income deduction. So if you are like managing your rentals, the first 20% that you make is tax-free. If you're not using an accountant that knows that, I would find one that does. And my expenses are so low that after those 3 house hacks, I was able to quit the W-2 and go full-time into real estate. I'm still looking for good investments, continue to help clients house hack. These would be kind of maybe my 5 big tips. Declare your income on your taxes. It's illegal not to. But also it helps you scale. So if you have it on your Schedule E, on your income, when your lender goes to look at your debt to income, they can use that income to offset your mortgage, and then you can use your W-2 or whatever income you have to qualify for the next house. So not taking shortcuts definitely helps you scale. Be creative. Multifamilies are super popular right now. They're competitive. There's a lot of ways to make single-family homes work, whether that's converting a garage or a basement. Use other people's money. So just like the bank loan or the garage loan, you can use other people's money to help your returns. I think that's a real positive. Have reserves, and then each time those rent payments come in, budget for more, and then educate yourself. So treat yourself to some good education, some books, some podcasts. It goes a long way. But don't stop there. You got to jump in and do it too. So, any questions? Any deep dives?